Well, I know you've all heard the news, or certainly in this audience, about the training facility in Cuba that's being planned. By the way, China already had operations there. That's no surprise. The sub, that is the Titanic submersible, not a submarine, but submersible, is also still a big story. The search is underway. You know, I said this on TV yesterday, that the sea is a vast environment with many unknowns. And I know it's not a surprising statement, but sometimes we see the calm waters on top, or maybe even the turbulent waters on top, and realize that we know less about the map under the ocean, the mapping of the seas, than we do about the surface of the moon. Just to give you a little perspective. Let's talk about that and more. In China, the Indo-Pacific, Prime Minister Modi is with President Biden in Washington today. They just came out a short while ago. So there's a lot on the table for my next guest, Dr. William Parker, CEO of Parker Maritime Technologies and retired naval officer as well. Bill, my friend, great to have you back here as always. But the submersible, while the story's captivating for many obvious reasons, what else is there to this from your perspective?
Well, David, first of all, it's great to be back on your show. No, you're right. There's so much going on in the world right now, but this submersible, the Titan, this is a group of engineers who have been doing this type of work for a very long time, and yet when they decide to put a submersible in the water with non-engineers, it's an experimental vessel. When they decide to do it in the worst weather in that area since 1942, when there are not the appropriate EPIRBs, when there is not an emergency blow capability, when a year ago there was a great deal of trouble with communications, and in fact they got lost for over 2 hours on their last trip and had lost communications. It concerns you, and these two of them are friends of mine, and they're very experienced people. But there were some things that could have happened. But on a bigger picture, I think, David, is that even with experimental craft, there need to be safety standards, and there also needs to be a requirement that there is a capability within a certain amount of hours away from you before you launch one of these things that can recover you, especially if you're going somewhere really deep, like 2 miles down, as is the case with the Titanic. So I think there's a lot of capabilities out there that should have been brought to bear before they ever put this in the water, and that didn't happen.
You brought up weather and temperature, currents, not just on the subsurface, but subsurface. North Atlantic is going through, as you mentioned, a very tumultuous pattern, my word for it. How much could that be? How much of an effect could that have, and how far down?
Yeah, it can be absolutely huge. And the impact, as you started your story off with today, the impact of what's going on below the seas can be significantly different than what you see on top. So you may have 6 to 12 foot seas at some point on the surface, but that could be much worse down below. Also remember that it's not a flat bottom, that the ocean is mountainous and it has crevasses in it, et cetera. So it's not a flat issue. Also, when you think about the fact that this submarine, if it lost power an hour into the mission and was relatively shallow still, it probably would have been lost off propulsion. It would have lost its flotation capability, and it would have started heading towards the bottom, much like Titanic did. And when Titanic struck, it did so at about 40 miles per hour. And if this thing hit at 40 miles per hour, as small as it is, potentially significant damage happens in that transit as it goes down. The time it takes to get down there at that speed is 4 to 5 minutes. So it's a pretty fast movement from the top of the surface to on the bottom next to Titanic.
When that happens in that speed, Bill, pressure and adjusting to pressure, we often think of coming to the surface, right? You come in stages. You've got atmospheric pressure changes, the bends. I think that's what most people recognize. But in reverse, what could that be like?
Well, so the bends are nitrogen bubbles in the blood system. In this particular case, what you have is increased pressure, as you point out, where every 100 feet is 3 atmospheres, and so you get down to 12,500 feet. You're basically looking at the idea of 4 or 5 school buses sitting on every square inch. That's how much pressure there is. That means that if you have one bolt or one seal somewhere begin to fail, this object, in this case the dive submersible, would compress and implode basically.